Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Between the Lines. On this podcast, you will hear about and from lesser-known Canadian authors and writers who, for whatever reason, have remained under the radar of traditional publishers and publishing houses. You will also hear from editors, literary agents, and publishers in the hopes of giving us all a better understanding of how it all works together. If it has something to do with writing or the writing process, you are going to hear a discussion about it here. I'm your host, Randy Lacey. I'm encouraging you to grab your bevy of choice, get comfy, and get ready to go between the lines. People come into writing in several different ways. For some, it was a teacher at school handing out a writing assignment, while for others, it may have been by reading and wondering if they might be able to write. Every writer has started their writing journey on a different path. Each writer's journey will be different, yet similar. But one thing all writers have in common is a different destination. Welcome to another edition of Between the Lines. We're going to do something a little different today. We're going to have a guest host who's going to be interviewing me by request of several of you. And so with that being said, here's Laurie Mueller.
Hi, Randy. It's sure nice to be here today. I'm in sunny British Columbia in Victoria, and you're over in Alberta across the line. And I think you had fresh snow this morning.
Yes.
I know that people that listen to your podcast are interested to know a little bit more about you. And that's why I thought it was a good idea that you become the interviewee instead of the interviewer for a time.
And here we are.
Here we are. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Randy Lacey, a man that I met online and have been reading and corresponding with, I don't know, for 3 or 4 years, I guess.
At least, yeah.
He's the author of 9 self-published poetry books, including his last 2 called The Year to Remember and A Year to Forget. So, welcome, Randy, in the interviewee chair.
This is different.
So, who am I? Well, besides being someone that Randy met online, I've written a book called What to Do When Someone You Love Dies. And I write a column. I've been writing for a very long time, since I was in grade 6. Mostly newsletters, things like that. Anyway, I'm always interested in what other people are doing and how they're doing it. So Randy doing this podcast, I find intriguing, interesting, and enlightening. So Randy, let's talk again about you. And the first question, we might as well get it off the people's minds right away. Are you a pantster, a plotter, or a planster?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess yes would be a sufficient answer in that I can and have operated under all 3, but my preferential way of doing things is just by the seat of my pants, so a pantster.
So let's back up a little bit. What would you like to tell the listening audience about yourself? Like, who is Randy Lacey and how did he get from where he started to where he is now?
Well, I guess if I go all the way back to grade 5 at St. George's Elementary School in Ottawa, I had a teacher named Mr. Lauren, and he brought us down to the library and had the librarian read to the class The Cremation of Sam McGee, the classic Robert Service. Yeah. And I fell in love with that style of hearing and listening. I wasn't a writer. I heard it. I thought that sounded really good in my ears and I liked it. And then he introduced us to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, and just the complexity, but the simplicity at the same time intrigued me. Not to write, that would come a few years later, but the The introduction really to poetry was those two poems. And then, of course, without realizing it, music, lyrics and music for the most part are poetry set to music, or at least that's what I think. And at the time, I was discovering all kinds of new music. So I started listening to the words. And, the music might have been cool or whatever, but it was the words that intrigued me the most. So fast forward a little bit to grade 9, and Mr. Hollingsworth at Woodruff High School in Ottawa again gave us a writing assignment to write a poem by the end of the week. And of course, you got the typical, that kind of stuff. But I went home and I banged out 3 poems like in one day. And so I submitted all 3 because I couldn't pick one. Back then, I wouldn't know a good poem, good amateur poem, if you will. And so I submitted them, and on a Friday, and on the Monday after he had graded them, he was handing them all back, and he didn't hand mine back, and he requested to see me after class. He took me aside and he says, "Did you really write these?" I went, "Well, yeah." He says, "Well, these are really good." And he says, "Have you ever heard of," and he named a popular musician. He says, "Have you ever heard of this guy?" I went, "Who hasn't?" He says, "Well, your style is very similar to this individual. And if I were you, I'd continue to write and maybe seek publication someday." And that got me on the path to writing. And that was in 1979. So ever since then, I've been writing. And, my early high school days, I wasn't the best of students. I dropped out of grade 11 5 times. I never officially completed high school at school. Over the course of my in and out of school, I've lost a lot of poetry because, you don't clean your locker out when you quit, you just leave. So I lost a lot of poetry. And so 1986 is the earliest poetry that I still have, that I can go back to and put a finger on it going, okay, well, this is really, I'll have to say this is the birth of my writing. But, over the years, you travel, you'll lose things and stuff, but I've tried to maintain everything I've written since then. But of course, life and whatever gets in the way, and you don't write all the time or as much as you'd like to. But I've always managed to find a time and place to write. And then, people are saying, "Well, you're a writer. Okay, write something right now." And of course, it's like telling somebody to tell you a joke and make them laugh right away. You can't, or it's kind of difficult. But I would never back down from a writing challenge. I was at work one day doing security, and one of the guys says, "Well, write a poem." I said, "All right, about what?" He says, "Well, there's a river going under that bridge. Write about the river." And, he went on patrol, and by the time he came back, I was done. And he was like, well, I guess you can write on demand. And, but yeah, so I love writing. I always have. And poetry has been my mainstay. And it was only in the last few years that I've discovered a love for maybe the short story. Of course, after I self-published my first book, Blind Ambitions, I started writing my memoir because, 13 years of living on the street, there's some interesting stories there. So I'm still reading it. What's that?
I will be reading it.
Well, yeah, I might even actually let you read it before I put it out so you can give me some pointers. But anyway, so yeah, I'm still working on that. Every month I revise a chapter, and it's I've had people say, this is a book that needs to be out there. So with that being said, I've done a lot of short stories, and I like the short story, and now I'm working on it might end up being a novel if I expand some of the stuff within it, but right now it's novella length. So there you go.
The way you started your story with the teacher who pulled you aside and gave you some pointers, doesn't it make a big difference when somebody acknowledges what we do? And it's almost like we want to do more because we've made someone smile or happy or meaningful to them.
Well, when that happened, I mean, I think his comparison, or the comparison that he gave me, was probably just something to inspire me even further. I don't think he was very accurate in it, but I understood what he was trying to do. And, many, many years later, I'm still very appreciative of what he tried to do that day. And, give credit where credit due. I don't know if he's still alive or whatever, but.
Well, what is your writing goal?
What is my writing goal?
Yeah.
I have no desire or preconceived ideas of where I want to go or do with my writing. I just write because I love to write. I've got a friend of over 35 years. Oh yeah, you want to be big and famous and rich. And I have no desire to be rich or famous, simply because when I was in a previous lifestyle, I had no shortage of money, and I saw what it did to me. As for being famous, I see what that does to some people, and I don't want that for myself, because I know myself well enough to know the potential that I can get myself into with either fame or money. So I write, and it's at the very beginning of most of my books, is I write not necessarily because I have something to say, but because maybe you have something you need to hear. So I write for other people. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. It does. So we kind of covered who started you on your writing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you didn't know if he was still alive or what, but if he was listening right now, what would you say to him?
I would say, Mr. Hollingsworth, you set me on a path that I never thought I could achieve or attain. And again, it's got nothing to do with wealth or fame. It's just setting a passion within me that would consume how I go through life. Because now I'm always looking for something to write about. And he taught me how to do that and why I should do that and why it's important. So, Mr. Hollingsworth, if you're listening, if you're still alive and you happen to hear this, thank you so much for taking the time to care about your students and to impart what wisdom you had and setting that fire.
I think he was probably a very good teacher too. Have you ever read a book and thought to yourself, hey, I could have written that book? If you have, what book was it?
Okay. In high school, again, we are assigned books to read as part of the curriculum, the teacher's curriculum. And, well, I was kind of a defiant kind of student. And the books that they suggested or said, this is what we're reading this year and blah, blah, blah. And I just couldn't get into any of the books. And I said, Mr. Hollingsworth, I will read the same amount of books of my choosing, giving you reports on every one of them and doing what needs to be done that you're asking the other students to. And he says, well, give me your list of books. And I showed it to him. And he says, okay, we can do that. And so basically I read the books, I did the thing. But back in high school, one of the books that was on the curriculum was actually The Outsiders by S2E10, as well as Rumblefish. And that was Then, This Is Now. And I really enjoyed the book. And years later, I'm visually impaired for those who really don't know, but years later, I've had the opportunity to, quote unquote, reread the book, but actually listening to the audio of it. And then I went, you know what? I could have written this book. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's where I got the idea to write my novella, which may be a novel, but that's where I got the idea, because it's a fictional autobiography of my life. And that's a kind of a weird genre. I don't even think it exists. Maybe it does. But I reached out to S.E. I didn't know anything about S2E10, so I did some research on who the author was and found out that S2E10 is actually a female writing as a boy, which was, okay, yeah, whatever. But was a high school student when she first wrote the book. She was 16. And her first year, it only sold 10 copies. But look at the status it has today. So anyway, I reached out to her via Twitter, and I said, hey, listen, you know what? Many, many, many years ago, I read your book, thought it was good. I've had the opportunity to reread, listen to it, and it inspired me to write my own story. And I just want to say thank you for writing that book and the other books that went along with it, and giving me the opportunity to develop my own story. You've encouraged me and you've inspired me. And she actually responded and said, well, thank you very much for that, and good luck with your endeavors. And the takeaway from that, though, is she's got like 145,000 followers. Now, 145,000 followers just saw her respond to me in a positive way. So I can't say for certain. It might be, egotistical for me to even think this way, but there's 145,000 people now looking at my name going, I wonder when he's going to release his book. But S.E. Hinton, I thought I could have written The Outsiders because there's a similar lifestyle there for me.
I've been going through something similar to that. I wrote one book and now I want to write a second book. And should I write about this or should I write about this? And I've got little bits and pieces. And it dawned on me a while back that the kind of book I want to write are the ones that are sitting in my library and that have made the biggest impact on me.
Well, they're in your library for a reason.
And they're in my library for a reason. So once I identified that, then things started flowing much more smoothly for me. So it's interesting to hear your answer. Thank you. What's your ideal writing space? Different people think you got to have the perfect desk and the perfect view and the best kind of computer and the best kind of pens. What is it for you?
My early writing, there was no ideal. It was when the idea sprang, I always carried a notebook with me of some sort. I used to carry pen and paper with me everywhere I went because everything inspired me to write. And it didn't matter what it was. I saw a frog in a stream. There was a poem there. I saw, like this morning I woke up early, and as you had mentioned, there was snow on the ground, and I wrote a poem this morning just by going to my window, and my cat was looking outside, and just the pristine, fresh, soft snow inspired, 4 or 5 is 9 and 6 is a 15-line poem. And,
Randy, that's how I knew what the weather was like at your place today.
Yeah.
It's because I read your poem online.
Yeah. But I mean, again, so for me, the early stuff, it was all on pen and paper and little slips of paper or a receipt or a napkin or whatever like that. And I'd take the napkin and I'd put it in a notebook or stuff like that. I'm digging out, notebooks from 87, 92, all throughout my writing. Since losing the majority of my vision in 2011, pretty much everything's been confined to computer. So I have a 42-inch monitor that is magnified to 150%. I've got a large keyboard, so everything is a little bit larger for me to see. I guess I should explain that my left eye is totally useless. It's black. There's nothing. I've got no vision. I don't see light coming in through it at all. My right eye, 25% of the retina is still attached right in the middle. The vision that I have with that is pretty foggy. So with the magnifications and stuff, and of course with the read aloud feature, I can type away at my heart's content and then listen to it to see where it needs improving. So that's basically how I function as a writer today. It's all computerized. I tried the handwritten thing. I used to have really good handwriting. I should be a doctor now.
Well, not a surgeon though.
No.
All right. So your ideal writing space now is having a computer that can adapt itself to what you need.
Exactly.
And
So I actually have an office where I do all my writing. So my living room turns into my office, which turns into my bedroom. And basically it's an old vault.
so what? An
An
old
old
vault?
vault of some
Vault.
sort. No windows. It's concrete. It's
Yeah.
nice and cold in the summer. It's nice and freezing in the wintertime.
Well, are you the type of writer who wants only to hear positive critique of your work, or how do you accept critique? And I think this is a timely question for me because you just said that I could read your book ahead of time and give you feedback. So I really want to know what kind of feedback do you like to accept that helps you to move forward?
Well, I can tell you this right now. One thing I don't like is fluff. I don't want my ears tickle. Oh, it's a good book. Well, I really, really liked it. I don't care if you like it or not. What concerns me is if it made you think, if it caused you to think, if it woke something up within you, if it caused you to feel. That's the kind of feedback I want. Well, I like it or I didn't like it. Well, that's just a matter of opinion. Everybody's got them, and as we know, opinions are neither right nor wrong. However, your feelings are you, right? So if it made you cry, if it made you sad, these are the things that I'm after. So keep your fluff, keep your niceties away. Just be honest with me, and honesty is really what I'm after. And if you liked it, I mean, again, that's good, but to me, if you like it or you didn't like it, really means nothing. Again, because it's just a matter of opinion, right?
Right.
I'm weird.
No, you're probably not as weird as you think you are.
Let me have my moments.
How much of yourself would you say goes into something you've written?
That's a pretty good question.
Yeah, you wrote it.
Well, yeah, I know. I would say there's more of me in my writing than most people realize. Most people reading would have to guess at what part is me and what part isn't. Those who know me well enough can read it and go, oh, yeah, I see that in you, or I know that about you, or things like that. I would like to think that most, or I think that most people who write include part of themselves within their writing, probably not as much as others or more than others. I don't know, but there's a lot of me in my writing. Like, for example, my novella, like I said, is a fictional autobiography, which means I've drawn a lot from my life to put in there because I've lived it, but I'm not giving you real names. I'm giving you real places, real events, and there's a lot of fiction that's thrown into it. But and my poetry, I mean, like you read the poem this morning, you got to feel that I'd actually lived that, right? This is what I experienced. So there's a little bit of me in there. So yeah, I would say there's more than people think, but less than people know. There's a big Cheshire grin on my face here, people.
Well, I think that that's probably true for I want to say most. I don't know if that's maybe not most, but a lot of people write. They don't realize that they're writing about themselves, but what they think and believe and act comes out in their writing in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now my question of the day is, who are your muses and how do they show up?
Who are my muses? I don't know that I can identify any one particular muse. There is, on Valentine's Day that just went by a couple of days ago, many years ago, in the mid-90s, I was engaged to be married, and we had broken up, and then we'd gotten back together, and then on Valentine's Day of 1996, we were supposed to recommit that engagement. We had a date planned and stuff like that, and she didn't show up, and 2 days later, I found out that she had been murdered. And so Natalie is her name, and a lot of what I write, the emotional part of what I write is usually drawn from that, because I mean, I was brought through, excuse me, I was brought through a whole range of emotions through that time period. It was also a pretty bad a couple of months, because 3 weeks after she was murdered, a friend of mine was found dead of a drug overdose. He didn't do drugs. And then 3 weeks later, my grandmother died. So that was a really intense few months for me. So there was a lot of emotion from high to low to, you know, it spanned, you know, probably every emotion that I could think of. And so that I draw a lot of emotion from in around that time. So I would say Natalie and my grandmother and Mark are three people in a short period of time who impact what I write to some degree. Yeah, I guess that would probably be the best answer I could give you with regards to that. And that's also a good question. I should write that one down.
I want to switch now to the next part of the interview.
All right.
Although I have to tell you, I have really been enjoying the things that you have to say. It's so enlightening for other authors and writers and creators to hear what's going on inside the mind of other people of the same ilk. And I also really appreciate the fact that you do these podcasts, because I know you do them because you want to help other authors. Mm-hmm. And I think you are. From my opinion, from my place, it is very helpful. I used to, before I kind of figured out who I was or what I was doing, I would go to the library and I would look for books that people had, autobiographies, because I thought maybe those books will give me a clue how I can lead my life. And a lot of times I was very disappointed, because I didn't really want to know who's who in the zoo. I wanted to know what they were thinking and feeling. And I think that you capture that in the podcast. So I just want to say thank you, Randy, for doing what you're doing.
Thank you for saying that. For the most part, the response that I've been getting, the feedback that I've been getting with regards to the podcast have been positive, you know. And again, the podcast itself is designed to highlight and showcase lesser known Canadian authors and writers who don't get that break because, you know, and here's where I have to stop being political, but that some of these major publishing houses or literary agents, or, you know, because they're telling us what to read. Oh, you got to read this. And they promote the heck out of it. And the you know, the lesser known remain lesser known because they don't fit into that groove or that niche that these people say we should be reading and following. And you know, a lot of the contests and whatnot, if you really look at who's winning, it's not who I think should be winning. But I'm not a judge, and, you know, whatever. So yeah, the podcast itself has been fun to do. You know, just another thing that this crazy blind guy just wants to try his hand at. So season 2, which this is part of, I've planned to try and interview some literary agents, some publishers, some editors, to give those who are starting out with their writing paths that these, you know, publishers and whatnot could point them on, you know, some of the common mistakes that are made, point them out, and maybe just help, you know, anybody really. But for those people just starting out, especially, that these literary agents or publishers or editors can really point to. And that's my goal for season 2. And there's still going to be some authors and writers and whatnot. So yeah, so I'm trying to cover as many aspects as I can. So
in response to the bit about editors and publishers, please ask them about their feelings and about themselves to kind of take away that feeling when we think about them as being some kind of
Monster.
Oh, I don't know. What's that?
Monster.
What did you say?
Likes to devour everything.
Monster or God or something. I think it's helpful to know them as real people, and what gives them joy, for instance.
Yeah.
So when you interviewed Tara Shannon, I heard her talking about her publisher, and she talked about her in using her first name. And all of a sudden, this publisher became a person to me. And I thought, oh, yeah, they are people.
Yeah.
It just took me to a different place listening to that. I'm excited for your next season too. All right. So under your part 2, what works do you currently have in publication? So let's hear about those so that people can go out and purchase them, and where.
Well, like you said earlier, I do have 9 books that I have self-published, but only 8 of them are currently available. The very, very first one, which was done through Friesen Press, which I guess is kind of a vanity press, or at least so I'm learning. But I stopped paying for distribution rights or whatever. And so I'm going to be redoing that book and re-releasing it. I'm just trying to figure out all the legalities behind it. But so Resolutions part 2, part 3, Leftovers and New Concoctions is actually part 4 of the Resolution series. It is comprised of the leftover pieces that didn't quite make it into the other 3 books because they were either too long or too short of poems. Like there's some 9-page poems in there, and whatever. And then after that, of course, was Word Gardens. And then there's another one entitled From Somewhere Deep Within. And now, of course, the 2 that you mentioned, the Year to Remember and A Year to Forget, which was basically all the poetry that I wrote in 2020. So basically what I do is I write poetry for a year, and then the following year is when I release those poems in a book form. And so I'm currently working on all the stuff that I wrote in 2021.
And writing your 2022 poems.
Yes, as well. And still working on the novella, still working on short stories and my memoir. Now my short stories, my love of writing the short story basically came out of those flash fiction contests. Yes. The monthly ones, like from Australia, what's it called? Curious Fiction. There's a little plug for them.
That are only doing it 4 times a year now instead of monthly. Yeah,
that's a bummer. Yeah. But
it's a lot of work.
Well, it is, yeah. And I mean, times are tough right now because of what's been going on in the world. But the parameters that they put up for their contest, which I think is a very great idea, but that gave me a lot of practice over like 2.5 years to write short stories. And so no more than 500 words, right? So that's good. But I've taken some of the ones that I've written for the contest and expanded them. And now some of them are, 2,500 words, 3,000 words, 500 words, or, And so that's given me, and I look at these contests as practice. I never expect to win. If I win, great, but it's practice. So, and that's really what we need to do is continue to practice our craft. And so I take these opportunities to hone. I don't worry about rejection letters because I really don't care. Again, if it goes, great. If not, no harm, no foul.
I noticed on one of the Facebook pages that people have been posting their rejection letters. And I thought, this is actually, at first I kind of wondered about it, but then I thought this is a really great idea because it's reminding people this isn't a failure. It's just another step in the process, and we all get them.
Well, that's what I tell people. They put out another rejection letter. And I say, you know what? Just because that particular company or whatever, they didn't accept it, doesn't mean it's not good. It just doesn't fit what they're doing. And so I've taken all the short stories that I've written for these contests, and I'm putting them into my own personal short story collection. And most of the stories are going to be under 2,000 words. So I've entitled and I think it's quite genius actually, but I've entitled the book, wait for it, because I am.
I am.
In not so many words. Short stories under 2,000 words.
Yeah.
Right?
Not so many words.
But so, yeah, they might be a rejection author, but you know what? Again, like I said, that's just because it didn't fit into what they were looking for at this time. Doesn't mean it wasn't any good. But I find a lot of people go that right away. Oh, well, it was, they didn't like it, and they think it's personal, but it's not.
I'm just wondering how many people listening to this podcast and other podcasts, of course, are taking notes, because there's lots of little bits of information or ideas that we can all take and do. And you're inspiring me to take a look at the few flash fiction stories that I've written and put them together in a booklet form.
Why not?
Why not? And keep doing that. I didn't know what the purpose of being of participating in these contests was until I was reading the Facebook pages, and then I went, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm going to ask you another question. Is there one of your books which you are more particularly fond of? And if there is, why?
I would have to say Blind Ambitions, only because it was the first one. And the whole purpose behind Blind Ambitions and the title is, it took me losing my vision to become ambitious about that dream that Mr. Hollingsworth planted within me so many years ago. That's the story behind the title. And my goal for that was just to be able to say that I've got something out there. It was a personal thing. Yeah, it might have been a vanity book or whatever, but it was a personal thing. It was a personal goal that I had wanted for myself. And I could finally say, look, I have got something on a bookshelf. And then after that, it was like, oh, well, I can continue to do this, because you know what? Most of my writing is blasé, but every now and then you get that one that speaks to somebody and they let you know about it. And there is something in all of my books that people have come back to say, you know what? That spoke to me. And if I can get one person to say something like that, or say, listen, this affected me in this way, then that makes what I've done a success. It's not how many books I've sold. It's not about, all this. It's about helping people.
Making a difference to somebody.
Yep.
So I have to tell you, I've still been sitting here thinking about the fact that you wrote a poem a day. My daughter currently, who is an adult and probably your age, has been taking a photo of the sunset every day.
Mm-hmm.
And she's on about 199 at the moment. So she's got a few more to go. I love the idea of having the goal, do something each day. So I've kind of come up with something while you were talking. And I'm thinking, because I like to take pictures and I like to put quotes on the pictures and post them, I'm now thinking I'm going to write a haiku a day and put it with one of the pictures and post that, or maybe publish it. But you see, you're an inspiration, even to me, that just is supposedly asking you the questions.
Well, turnabout's fair play, I guess.
Yeah. Now, where can people contact you? Things like your email, your website. What's your website, Randy?
Very, very easy. It's www.therandylacey.ca. And from there, you click on you click on blog, and it'll take you to another website that I have as well, where it has all my blog posts. Eventually it'll have my podcast and my podcast transcriptions. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. I've got a friend of mine who's helping me with it. So, but yeah, that's the main one, therandylacey.ca. And the email address is therandylacey@gmail.com.
So therandylacey@gmail.com.
Yep.
Okay. And are you on Twitter?
I am. And on Twitter, I am at gobbledygook. So
okay, you better spell that for everyone.
All right. GOBBLDGOOK.
Okay. Gobbledygook.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that was pretty, a pretty ingenious name for such a format, because really it all, you had 140 words, 140 spaces that you could only use, right? So
right.
A lot of it was coming out as gobbledygook, and we know gobbledygook is silly speak, and it's either we're going back to hieroglyphics or. Okay,
and I imagine you're on Instagram if you're on Facebook. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's Blind Soul 52.
Blind Soul, and that would be SOUL.
Correct.
52.
Number
52?
5, number 2, yeah.
Okay. On Instagram. And are you on TikTok?
No.
No TikTok. Okay. Anything else? Anywhere else that we could find you if?
Well, I mean, I do have a private writing group on Facebook, as you know, because
let's talk about that.
You're a member.
I am,
and it is called the Canadian Creative Writers. So people can see it. The general public can see the group, but it's a private group. So if you want to join, you need to request to join, and then answer, 3 skill testing questions, which are basically, where in Canada do you currently reside? The second question is, what do you either hope to get out of or contribute to the group? And the third is probably the most important of all the 3 questions, and is that, what's your favorite cheese and why?
I don't remember those questions.
No, you got bumped into the group right away because you were one of the first 10.
Folks, can you see I'm a Randy fan?
Well, you followed me over from Canada Writes.
I did.
As did a lot of other people.
Yes, I wasn't the only one. I know that.
Yeah. And one of my administrators, we actually met in a Walmart in Calgary. I was blindly looking for something, and she came along and said, "Can I help you find something?" I go, "Oh, do you work here?" She said, "No, I do not." I said, "Well, maybe you should, because none of the other people that work here even approached me." She was, "Well, whatever." And I asked her what she did. I said, "Do you want a job here at Walmart? I'm sure we can get you one." She was, no. She was, "I'm a writer." And I went, "Oh, so am I." And then it just took off from there. And, we're friends and so, yeah. So I said, "Listen, I'm starting my own group. Come on over and be an admin for me." And it's been working great.
That was supposed to be the last question, but I really want to ask you this one. What has been the greatest joy producing your podcasts?
Oh, there's so much stuff that's made me joyful. One, getting to meet people, and finding out, what makes them tick, and, about, what they like to write and stuff. Like season 1, there was 15 interviews, plus there was 2 Christmas specials, which I really enjoyed. That was a lot of fun. And I will do again for season 2 because people seem to respond to it. But so, like, for example, I interviewed you. You were my second interview. You were my first Zoom interview for the podcast. Terry Fairhurst Lineman. She was my first in person.
She met you at a coffee shop.
Yeah. And so that was kind of cool. So, but Barry Freeman and the list goes on. And it's been good to learn about people, which I love to do, and what inspires people. And so, like, Amanda, who was just last week's upload, she lives in the same town as I do. Yeah. And so she was here in my studio in the basement. So that was a very fun. She's also my computer geek and helps me with my computer stuff as well. And but it's been fun getting to know people. It's been fun the process of putting this all together, especially as a visually impaired person, it's a new challenge, right? So being visually impaired has been, and I'm going to use this word in whatever connection you make with it is fine. But for me, becoming visually impaired has been a blessing because it has allowed me to do and learn things I don't think I would have learned otherwise. For example, the dream to publish a book died a long time ago, right? But I'm sitting in my hospital bed for 5 months and, I just got this urge to write and publish again. So now I also blend spices and create hot sauces. And I'm also, I volunteer with youth. And so you try being a blind guy, keeping up with some of these teenagers. But then the podcast, I was just like, hey, you know what? I think I could do this. And so I started, doing the research that I needed to, buying the equipment one piece at a time. And then finally, when I had enough equipment, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. How am I going to do it? And then the idea, because I was getting frustrated with, CBC or some of these, big book companies or whatever. And no, you know what? The little guy needs a break. And so I'm hoping to give these little guys the break they need.
I think that's great. Well, like I said, thank you for doing that. And thank you for letting yourself be interviewed. I appreciate it.
And thank you for being willing to sit in the chair that I normally sit in.
Well, it's not as easy as it looks, apparently.
So you're leaving the editing to me now? Oh, come on. No, it's good. I've enjoyed being in this chair. And, there's been a lot of people who are curious about, they just see what I put online and stuff like that. And I never expected Canadian creative writers to go beyond 100 people. And now we're fast approaching 1,200 people in the group.
Really?
Yes.
That's great.
It is, and so I put my mind to something and look what it became. And, what are my, some of my rules about the group are very simple. No politics, no platforming. It's about writers, by writers, for writers. And if what you post has nothing to do with writing, it's gone.
We can post our websites and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. Self-promotion is good.
Yeah. I think I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some people that go a little bit overboard on it, and they just want the group to, promote themselves, and they get stern warnings like, you agreed to our rules, and our rules say, don't do this that often. And so I created, Crow Wednesday, which is a day specifically for people to brag about what they've done or what they're doing or what's coming. And, people.
I should go on there. Oh, no, I can't. I was going to say, I should go on there and say that I interviewed you. But no, you've got this great thing going about the secrecy of who it is. So I'm not going to say anything until I thought that was great. Yeah.
Feel free to. It doesn't really matter. The build up and the hype. And a lot of people don't know who you are.
I think most people don't know who I am.
Right. So not only that, but they'll say, oh, who's this? And they'll go to the podcast and go, oh, he actually interviewed her. And then, so we'll just bring people around. But your book, by the way, I've been showing a lot of people. And as I told you, my pastor, I don't know if he's ordered them or not, but he's ordering.
Not yet. Not yet. Not as of yesterday, anyway. Because I would see if there was 3 at a time.
Yeah, that's what I would imagine. But he wants to put one in the church library. He wants to put one in the senior center or the seniors drop-in center. And he wants to put one in our public library. And that's the other thing I'm doing with this podcast. Anybody that I interview, I'm asking if they'd be willing to donate a copy of their, one of their works or their only work to our public library, because that promotes them. It fills our library with new content,
So here's something that's interesting. I don't know if you can use it in any way, but our public library is called the Greater Victoria Public Library, and it encompasses quite a few of the municipalities. And they have something which I'm a part of now, the emerging writers. And they will have a display up that focuses on our writing. So everybody who's just written a book between, I don't know whether it was 2012 and 2020 or something like that, we've donated the book to them, and they're going to have a little party and display. That's kind of exciting.
So one of the people that I interviewed, Erin Patterson, her book is All Good Things. And so I asked her, I said, hey, listen, would you be willing to donate a copy of your book to my public library, of which I'm the chairperson of? And she was like, oh, absolutely. I think that's a really cool idea. So, of course, when to get a book into a library, it has to be processed and, documented and all that stuff that, libraries do, right? And I said, when it finally hits the shelves, I will go take some pictures for you and stuff. And so because of, Christmas and everything that was going on right now, it took a little longer to get there, but it finally showed up, and it's on new arrivals. And so on the shelf that she's on, she's beside some other books, and I snapped a picture. Actually had our library manager snap a picture, and I sent Erin the pictures. And not only was she excited that her book was on the library shelf, but the author that it was beside is one of her favorite authors. So she was like,
is that cool?
To the moon.
Yeah.
So, and then I've gotten other copies of books from Colette, for example, her book Broken Bread. So a lot of the people that I've interviewed have books that are autobiographies or memoirs, if you will. Sorry. And so like Erin, I mean, her personal struggle, you can read about it or listen to the podcast. Same with Colette. I mean, she at 47 was diagnosed with celiac disease. So the adjustments in her life. Right.
Yeah.
And so, one of the guys, Barry Freeman, he's like 78 years old. He published his first book.
I'm trying to think where he lives.
He lives just west of me. Just west of me.
He's in Alberta.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not sticking with people from Alberta. Obviously, I've covered, talked to people from all over the country, Ontario, BC, Alberta. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not just trying to stick with, a homegrown.
But I have noticed there has been a lot of women as opposed to, there's more women than men.
More women have responded. So like I put out a general call saying, anybody want to be interviewed for my podcast? More women responded than men.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I'm done recording this, that I'm back into the interviewer chair. You have been listening to Between the Lines. In future episodes, I will not only be speaking with Canadian authors and writers, I will also be speaking with those from the other side of the writing industry, editors, agents, and publishers, in the hopes of getting a better understanding of how it all works together. If you liked what you heard, hit the subscribe button to be notified of new episodes and content. Send all your comments, suggestions, or any questions you'd like to have a guest answer to me at randy.bplpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to visit me at www.therandylacey.ca. While there, look for the Buy Me a Coffee button to help support the podcast. Thank you for your time and your ears. Tune in, be inspired, and write on.